Good afternoon, everyone. We've had a full day. I want to first thank Rice University and the Baker Institute of Public Policy for hosting this event. And I'd like to introduce first Secretary of State James Baker. We'll have a few words about our meeting, and then President Jimmy Carter, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Bob Pastor. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Baker Institute. We've had roughly 7.5 hours of proceedings today. The first 4.5 were public testimony by experts in this area of federal election reform. And the last 3.5 or 3 hours were in a private session among the commissioners, trying to discuss some of these issues and perhaps decide upon the directions that we might take to solve some of the problems that were identified in our first hearing at American University in Washington, D.C. A month or so ago. We will meet again at the Carter Center in Atlanta on the 30th of August, and then we tentatively plan to finish our report and have it available for presentation to the executive branch and legislative branch of government sometime in the middle of September of this year. Let me repeat, if I might, a little bit of what I said this morning regarding President Carter. It's a real pleasure to welcome him to this institute, to our institute here. A pleasure to work with him as I have upon occasion in the past. We worked very effectively together when he was a former President of the United States and I was Secretary of State, and we were able to remove Central America as a major irritant between the two major political parties in the United States, and in addition to that, to solve that as a foreign policy problem. We've discussed issues involving voter registration, voter identification, voter technology, election administration. We did a lot of that, as I indicated at our original meeting. Today we talked about some of the possible solutions to problems in those areas, and we will continue, as I say, on August the 30th at the Carter Center. Mr. President, it's a real pleasure to have you here and to work with you.
Thank you, Jim. Well, President George W. Bush and I don't always agree on everything, but when I went to see him in January and discussed the possibility of this commission, and we discussed who I would prefer in the whole nation to be my co-chairperson, immediately he and I simultaneously said Jim Baker. So we agree on that at least, and I have never been sorry about any relationship that I've had with Jim Baker, whom I really admire and with whom I've been completely compatible. We may not agree on everything on this commission, but we've had a chance to discuss some generic questions. First of all, is how to have maximum voter registration and participation without fraud. Another thing is, how do you make sure that when people do vote, they have confidence in the procedure, and if there are serious questions, that the procedure can be checked for accuracy and integrity. And the other thing is, how do you do this on a bipartisan basis so that the political parties and the Congress and the President and the general public all agree in general on what we should do? So we'll be trying to answer all those three basic questions before we make our recommendations public in September. So this is what we've done today and previously in Washington and in the future at the Carter Center, and then the final report to be made in Washington. So I think now the time for any questions that anyone might have.
Yes, in the back, please introduce yourself first.
All right. My name is Mike Barajas. I'm with the local Fox station. Of all the areas that you've been exploring and examining, which is the most troublesome as far as voting?
Jim, go ahead. You can answer.
We've spent a lot of time on voter registration and on voter identification. As the President indicated, we have two twin goals here, twin considerations: ballot access and ballot integrity. With respect to voter registration, as you probably know, that as a result of some of the fine work that was done by the Carter-Ford Commission following the 2000 election, of which this commission is a follow-on, the United States Congress passed the Help America Vote Act. And that act provided for assistance to the states to help them in the administration of federal elections. One of the things that we're looking at is the absence today of registration databases in the various states that are interoperable one with the other. It would be very useful from the standpoint of both ballot access and ballot integrity if that were to occur. We are also looking at possible ways to improve upon voter identification, and without specifying a particular method or approach, we're looking at a number, all the while keeping in mind that we have a federal system in this country, and that one thing that neither of us want to do is to federalize the election process in the United States.
I think that's a very good description of it. One of the things that concern us is the lack of uniformity within states. In effect, we have about 4,400 different election authorities. That is almost all the counties and all precincts. They have their individual authority. So within states, we'd like to have it completely uniform, not have the federal government dominate, but at least as far as voters lists are concerned, where voters move from one state to another, we don't want them to vote twice, to make sure that the data from one state is acceptable and compatible with the other. So this is what we have been wrestling with.
Hi, Lila LaHood with LaHood Productions, an independent documentary film company. There was a lot of discussion earlier today about making voting easier, yet several of the speakers today acknowledged that making voting easier doesn't guarantee a big jump in participation. What kinds of reforms do you think could affect the kind of cultural changes that would result in a significant increase in voter participation?
Well, as you probably know, under the legislation passed after President Ford and I had our commission, it was a provisional ballot process where someone who came to a place could cast the ballot and it would be counted later on, even if they didn't qualify to vote in that particular place. That is one thing that would make it more uniform, and it was a major step forward, which Congress approved. The problem there is that the provisional ballot provision has been interpreted differently in different parts of individual states, and to make that more uniform would be very good. Another one is to make the voting process more pleasant, more attractive, more accommodating. Now it's very difficult to know exactly how to register. It's very difficult for people who live overseas. It's very difficult for students to be able to vote. And the voting registration process quite often is quite varied among the states. Some states have election day registration, where you can just go to the polls. If you're not even registered, you can register there and vote. Others don't. So to try to expand the number of voters who participate is another very good point.
We have looked at, there has historically been this debate between those who are more interested in ballot integrity and those who are more interested in ballot access. And the major political parties have divided on that issue. And if we are successful in arriving at a consensus for a way in which the states can have voter registration databases that, as I said, are interoperable and information can be exchanged one with the other, and if we are able to, in connection with that, come up with a voter identification procedure that will improve the confidence of the voter in our election system, that will go a long ways toward eliminating this debate, which is, I think, has become a sterile debate between ballot integrity and ballot access. We're working on that.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm Eve Robertson from Santa Rosa, California, and I'm here to say that I think one of the major problems that I have heard as an election official is that of people wanting to be sure that their vote is accurately counted, and I'm hoping that this commission will consider that we do need to have an auditable source, such as a paper source, no matter what sort of original registration and voting system that we have. and I hope that will be considered.
This is something we considered quite at length this afternoon and this morning. That is, we're shifting dramatically, as you know, to electronic voting of different kinds. And we now have a problem in that a lot of voters just don't have confidence in the electronic system, even though it may be completely fair and have integrity. So how do you let the voters know that their electronic ballot is compatible with their desires is one thing. The second one is, how do you check later on to make sure that the electronic tabulation was accurate if there is a question raised? That's another very important point. And in a contested election, how do you go back and recertify the accuracy of the overall vote? So we're just addressing that very thoroughly, and your question is one that was very pertinent to our discussion this afternoon.
Is there any other questions?
Question for President Carter.
Please identify yourself. And this will be
I
the
want to
last
block the
question.
cameras. Dennis Spellman from WB39 here in Houston. Just wondered if we could stray off topic for just a second to get your... if we could get your reaction to news that the Iranian president-elect may possibly be linked to the hostage situation. One of the hostage takers is what some of the allegations are.
I saw on television this morning that allegation, and I think I saw it in the newspaper as well. I don't have any way to know if the new president was one of the captors of our hostages, which was a completely illegal and improper and despicable action. I did see in the news that his top assistant has denied that the new president was involved. I would hope that the information could come out, but the fact that he denies it implies that if it is true, it would be deleterious to him. I don't know the answer to the question about whether he was involved or not. I don't think there's any way to punish him because he lives in Iran, and of course, there were a lot of people that were involved and well known, and including the Ayatollah Khomeini, who after a few days did endorse the process and kept it going for more than 400 days. So I don't think there's any chance of punishment. It's just a matter of the international community believing or not believing that the new president was involved in an illicit act.
Well, let me once again thank you very
Oh,
much.
there's another
I'm
question
sorry.
over here.
Back there, please.
Back on topic,
Go
I'm
ahead.
Kristen Mack from the Houston Chronicle, and I just wanted to ask the question. There was some concern expressed at the end of this morning's hearings that Congress may not be willing to readily accept whatever recommendations the commission makes. How likely do you think they are to implement the suggestions that you make, and how soon do you think they may go into effect?
Well, let me try to answer that. When we completed our study 4 years ago, it was very doubtful that the federal government would get itself involved in the formally exclusive arena of state authority to pass a definitive voting bill, and they did with the Help America Vote Act. That was a startling development. I don't think there's any doubt now that that concern still exists. There's an additional factor in that since the Congress did address that problem, they don't want to reinvent the wheel or get involved once again in a controversial matter. So what our recommendations will do is to spell out as best we can the recommendations of a bipartisan and I would say enthusiastic group of very knowledgeable people, including access to the finest experts in our country. This is what we believe should be done to improve our education system. It will make an impact in the White House, I hope. It will make an impact, at least in the Congress. It will make an impact on all states, including their secretaries of state or their top election officials, and we hope it will make an impact on the general public. So it may be a long time before all the recommendations that we make are even seriously considered. But there'll be one definitive assessment of how our election process can be made better. And we hope that some benefits will come from it.
And let me add, if I might, that we intend to make our recommendations without regard to whether or not there is today feeling on the part of Congress that they want to deal with it this year. We understand this, the fact that they've just done this, that they may not have any real stomach for dealing with the very difficult issues of federal election reform this year or even next. But we intend to make some recommendations that we think are needed and that we think are good and that we think are proper. I'm serving on this commission, as I indicated at the press conference up at American University at the request of President Bush. And we're going to come up with what we think are the right recommendations, and we're going to put them up there and see if anybody runs them up the flagpole.
I might add, there's already a substantial amount of interest in the Congress in election reform because there are a number of, how many bills are in the Congress now? Well over a dozen major bills being considered now by the Congress. And I think that had we not had the commission 4 years ago, the Congress would still be debating among which major bill to take up first and that sort of thing. But to put all of the recommendation premises in one package, as we intend to do in September, might help to encourage the Congress to take action earlier and more definitively than they would otherwise.
Let me conclude by, first of all, thanking all of our commission members who are here, thanking American University for organizing the commission, thanking Rice University and the Baker Institute for hosting this session, and especially thanking our co-chairs and all of you for coming here today. Thank you.
And I want to express my personal admiration for Lloyd Benson, who's in the front row. He's one of my heroes,
And I would certainly like to echo that. An outstanding Treasury Secretary.